5 of your written statement to us, I quote, "For effective crisis management, it is important to recognise past mistakes, identify and allocate losses quickly and equitably, and move on." Now, the losses were certainly allocated quickly. Were the losses of the crash allocated equitably within Ireland?
I think one needs to make a couple of points in this regard. Equity for many of the banks was wiped out. It was certainly wiped out for Anglo, and a large portion, so equity holders took substantial losses, right? And that's as needed. Sub-debt holders also took substantial losses, and that was also entirely appropriate because they're next in line, and sub-debt holders are subordinated debt is risk-bearing. Where it might have fallen short, as I've said a number of times, is that there wasn't sufficient burden sharing with senior bank.
And in that regard, Mr. Chopra, can I ask you, why do you use the word might? Is it the case that international banks and financial speculators and bondholders operate in the capitalist financial marketplace? That the rules are that they make fabulous profits at time, but if they gamble and the gamble goes down, they take the losses. But in this case, is it true that the Irish people were burdened with those losses with terrible social consequences? How do you justify that as a part and a leading member of the Troika?
I think the important thing to keep in mind is that behind every profligate borrower, there's often a profligate lender as well. And I do think that profligate lenders should have to bear losses.
But the Irish people, the vast majority, were not profligate lenders nor borrowers, but they were the one that was saddled with paying for those who were profligate, that minority, that elite. Is that moral?
I would say that there were a number of profligate Irish borrowers as well.
Would you say that the vast majority of ordinary people were profligate?
No, in the aggregate. So
what does that mean, Mr. Chopra?
I'm obviously not in a position to say, was borrower A profligate and borrower B wasn't. But I can only talk in terms of the aggregates.
Mr. Chopra, with respect, the evidence that we've taken here is of a number of banks giving massive and incredibly large loans to the tune of billions to individual land speculators or others. The evidence is that the majority of the Irish people were not involved, but they paid the price. I'm asking you, is that morally justifiable?
I've been on the record in saying that I think the Irish taxpayer did have to bear a disproportionate burden in this case, yes.
Mr. Chopra, when you arrived here to impose the Troika programme, there was a widely used photograph showed yourself and Troika colleagues passing an obviously poor man who was begging and perhaps homeless. In the context of the programme that you implemented with the Irish governments, and in the 5-year sense, are you aware that there has been a huge increase in families, especially mothers and young children, becoming homeless on a weekly basis? Can I ask you, Mr. Chopra, you presided over tens of billions going into bail out the financial institutions and bondholders, at the same time, and consequently the starvation of funds to social and affordable homes. Is that justified?
Deputy, we did meet with a wide range of social partners when we were here. We were very much aware of the distress being faced by many Irish households. You've got to understand that program funding is not earmarked. Even the earmarks that I talked about earlier between fiscal financing and the banks was a notional difference. The issue for us was to encourage the government, as it was designing its fiscal consolidation measures, to be mindful of choosing measures that took equity and social hardship into account. Now, were we fully successful in getting them to implement more measures to ameliorate social hardship? That's for you to judge. These were choices that were made by the sitting Irish governments at the time.
Can I ask you, Mr. Chopra? Well, at the same time, Mr. Chopra, you're saying page 9, you refer to the 16 billion of unsecured senior bondholder exposure, and it was the diktat of the Troika that they would be bailed out by the Irish people. Do you agree that that would have built a lot of social homes if the priorities had been different? And my last question, Mr. Chopra, because my time is up, you say in page 7 that there were ill-advised calls from some other European creditors for Ireland to raise its corporation tax rate. Mr. Chopra, why is it advisable to pile taxes and cuts on working people and poor people who carry no responsibility for the crisis, but ill-advised to demand that big business should pay more taxes on profits?
Thank you, Deputy. Mr. Chopra, final reply, and then I'm moving on.
Okay. The issue of the corporate income tax was one of ensuring that growth would not be harmed by more than necessary given the choice of measures. The corporate tax was a central feature of Ireland's business model at the time, to the extent that the country has a business model. And even though there may be a good case to address this over the medium term, we did not think that this needed to be a part of the program at that time.
Thank you very much.